Hello, welcome to Ethical Sales Training for Financial Advisors and Investment Professionals and Retirement Income Planners. On today's episode, we're going to talk about one of the easiest and most effective ways of helping your client feel comfortable as you're dealing with them. And that is the idea of using go-ahead words instead of nasty words. The idea behind it is that the words you use and the way you say things are important. At the end of the day, of course, if someone doesn't want to go with your offering and it doesn't make sense for them to go with your offering and your proposal, they're not going to do it no matter what you say. Alternatively, if someone really, really likes you and your proposal is spot on and makes complete common sense to them, it's excellent, you probably can't screw it up. But those are the 10 to 20% extremes. So where most sales training comes into play, our training, anyone else's training, and where it makes a difference is in that middle 60% roughly, maybe even 70%. So the 10, 15, 20% on the edge cases, no matter what you say, it's not going to make a difference. You know, the old saying is you can't give a bad presentation to the right person, and you really can't give the right presentation to the wrong person. But you can make a difference in those center areas, in that center range. And that's where the sales skills, the people skills, the persuasion, the influence comes into play. And what I've learned over my 30 plus years is that oftentimes it's more about, it's about a vibe, it's about a feeling, it's about a sense that people get when they're with you. It's about how you make them feel. It's not that one particular closing technique is going to make the sale. It's not that if you screw this particular word scripting up that you're not going to get it. It's more about doing a number of smaller little things that can make, again, the vibe feel better about you being with them. We'll do a whole training on that. I call that the jacuzzi method. The point is you want to make them feel like they're in an emotional jacuzzi. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about one of these techniques, which is the words that you use. And I feel that most sales professionals in general, not just in financial services, don't realize how important and how certain words have an effect on people. Now, you don't know the intimate psyche of the person you're talking to, so we're going to use generalizations that are probably true for most people that we come across. So, for example, using a word like contract. I'm going to give you a list of words in a few moments about that you can use in the replacements. But let's say, for example, the word contract. You say you're at the point where they're asking you what's the process, or maybe you're at the point where you're closing and what's the next step. And then you say, all we have to do is sign the contract. Now, you're going to lose the sale because you said the word contract or even the word sign if they're like ready to go. Of course not. It's going to go right past them. However, if they're in the fence and maybe that word contract, which is a scary word, and the word signing, which is very final, and I'm exposing myself and I'm committing to something, along with maybe a few other things that they don't know why, but had a little bit of a negative emotional effect on them, that might not do it. So the old adage that I've always used is, I got this from Tom Hopkins, which is you want to make it easy for them. And that doesn't just mean your procedures are easy and quick and fast. So that's important. That's a whole nother training. But it's that emotionally it's easy. That's the jacuzzi method. You're making it like they're in a jacuzzi with you. It's very easy. Everything's easy. And they don't even always know what that is. And that's where the words come into play. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to learn some of these words, and you'll come up with your own that tend to, for most people, generally have somewhat of a negative connotation. And you're going to replace words that generally, for most people in most contexts, have either positive or at least a better connotation than the words that they're replacing. That's the idea. And what you need to absolutely do is practice. I remember way back in the day sitting around in the office with the other guys and gals, and we would play a game. And we had a list of the words that we didn't like and a list of the words that we were supposed to use to replace them. And we would just have conversations. And if anyone used a bad word, then they had to pay, a quarter into the jar. If other people caught that person, and vice versa, you would do it. We would do it over and over again until most of us could probably almost go a whole day with other people watching us, and we'd never use the bad word. You have to practice it. Hopefully you're agreeing with what I'm teaching you, and it maybe makes sense to you. But if you don't practice it, then when you're out in the real world, you're going to fall back on using the normal words you do. So let's go through just a few. And depending upon your situation or exactly where you work, or maybe you're watching this video and you're not even in financial services, but you're in sales, you're going to come up with different words, but you're going to get the idea when I share this with you. So let's jump over here. All right, let's go with the first one. So on the left, we have cost. And on the right, here we have the nasty words. On the right-hand side, we have go-ahead words. So as an example here, instead of saying the word cost, you might say amount, expense, or fee. So, and also understand the clients, your clients or prospects will use many of these words. Don't correct them. It's just when you say it, you're going to use the alternative. So for example, they might ask you, what's the cost? And let's say you're talking about a mutual fund. You may say, well, the annual expense ratio is, 0.75. Now, they may then ask you, what does that mean? Expense ratio, whatever. The point is, though, you now use the word, more important, you didn't use the word cost. Okay. Or how much does it cost me to hire you? Well, the great thing is that the expense, if you will, to hire me is built into the product, which is such and such, or whatever your explanation happens to be. Okay. Cheaper. I don't know about you, but I'm a big fan of using low cost, and I'm using the word here with you guys, low cost, okay, in terms of training, but using low cost mutual funds. So the whole cheaper, lower cost was always a very, very big issue for me in my career. So I'd even want to make the point that my product that I'm offering is generally cheaper, right? But I don't want to use the word too much, because then the reason is cheaper tends to be a word that connotates less quality. Okay, doesn't mean you'll never ever use it. You're not going to lose the sale because you use some of these. You just want to generally get better. So instead of saying cheaper you may say, for example, the products I recommend tend to have a lower fee than the average of the same type of product in the industry, or has a better value. Even it's less expensive. It's just because the word cheaper, it is in fact cheaper, but it just has a little bit of a negative connotation, like they're missing out on something if they go cheaper, which of course they're not. But contract, I happened to mention that one earlier. I've always liked paperwork. That's an easy one for me. Say, one of the next steps we do is we have to get the paperwork together and then, go through it, et cetera. So I just say paperwork instead of contract. And understand with all of these that I'm saying, if there is what's the word I want to use, a situation, or you're in this process somewhere where you're getting into the legalese of it, then maybe you need to use the word contract and sign and other words. But this is just in general conversation. Buy. People don't like to buy because it costs money and it's a process, but they love to own. Right? No one wants to go through the process of buying a car, but once they got it, they love owning it. So you might not say, hey, once you buy this mutual fund, it's more like once you own a share of this fund, or even you own this fund, things like that. Okay. Sell or sold. Here's where this one comes into play. This oftentimes you'll use this if you have been introduced to them by a client of yours, referral, which we'll talk about that in a moment, and then you're referencing them back. Hey, well, when I talked to the Johnsons and I sold them the mutual fund, which was a lot cheaper, they were really happy that they were able to buy it after they signed the contract. But that's obviously a whole slew of negative words. So you might say, listen, when I help the Johnsons get involved in their retirement plan, which I can't go in detail, obviously, for privacy reasons, but obviously they're a client because they recommended you to me. Well, they were really happy. Or whatever it is you're trying to say is I didn't sell them something. I got them involved. Or sometimes I like, as you can see here, help them. When I help the Johnsons with their two daughters' college plans, I like to think that they were pretty happy with it. So it's just get them involved. I got them involved. I helped them. I aided them, things like that. Pitch, this one's really a pet peeve of mine. You see this in movies all the time too. If there's a scene with a salesperson, or even nowadays in the tech industry, it's popular to call it a pitch deck, right? In terms of a number of slides that you're going to present to someone, usually for an investor. And pitch is just that really salesy, used car salesman, a grifter kind of connotation. It's a presentation. You give them a presentation, and then proposal is a more specific presentation customized to the client, right? When you first meet them, you give them a generic presentation, what it is you do, how you do it, maybe some examples of the kind of work that you do. And then if they agree to it, you come back and you build something for them, some kind of financial plan of some sort. That's a proposal. Either way, it's not a pitch. You're not going to pitch him something. Referral, this is not a big one, but I just think introduction's a little bit better. And, the Johnsons were kind enough to introduce you to me. Or depending upon how it, played out, you might say I'm very happy that the Johnsons introduced me to you. Okay. And if I do a great job with you, it'd be wonderful if you would be open to the idea of you introducing me to people that you think may want to hear about what I have to say. Whatever. Again, introducing instead of referral. A referral can be, it's not super bad. It's just not. I think introduction's better. Deal as instead of using deal, sorry, use opportunity or transaction. I'm not the biggest fan of transaction, but opportunity is better. This is a wonderful opportunity. This is an opportunity for you to finally get your retirement plan started, or finally organize. Based on the brief information I've seen that you've shown me, it looks like you have some good investments. But what one of the things I'll be able to do is give you a really good opportunity here to just reorganize everything, so we really know where we're at. Instead of deal, right? Or deal, this is a great deal. Deal, again, deal is kind of along with pitch and sell. It's all that kind of used carsman's vibe. Sign, again, I want to stress, like I mentioned earlier, if you're in a moment where everything's kind of legalese and you got to use the word sign, yes, you are signing an agreement. But in general, it's approve. Now, I know in one of the firms I work for, we use DocuSign, which I'm sure most of you watching are familiar with. In that case, usually you do say e-sign to make it clear. You say we're going to get the paperwork together, and I'm going to kind of process that paperwork through something called DocuSign. I'm sure you're familiar with it, and then you e-sign it. In that case, you're going to have to just say e-sign. You're not going to say e-approve. That's just too corny. But in other cases, if someone says, so, do I have to sign the paperwork or something? You say, yeah, you approve it, right? Next one's problem or challenge. It's not a problem, it's a challenge. This is both for you psychologically as a salesperson in your mind. This is not a problem, just like an objection isn't an objection, it's a question. So sometimes it helps you to reframe it. But even with them, they might say, for example, maybe there is a problem, right? Maybe they're a client now and something came up and it's either your fault or the broker dealer's fault or it's the fund family's fault. It's not your fault, but they're calling you because you're their advisor. And they're going to call it a problem. Hey, we got a problem here, Michael, because such and such. And that's fine. You never correct them, right? But when you refer back to it, it's a challenge. So you might say, yeah, George, I agree. This is a major challenge. And here's what I need. Here's the next steps I need to do and I will do to try to resolve this. See, so when it's kind of like I mentioned earlier, it's when you refer back to this thing, it's now you're calling it a challenge, they're calling it a problem. Because again, it's all that jacuzzi thing, which I know I didn't get into too much, but it's all keeping you're trying to reduce their anxiety. That's what, in a nutshell, that's what it is. And by using words that, and of course your tone of voice, is you're trying to, at a minimum, prevent the anxiety from rising, but if possible, even lowering it. Commission. Instead of a commission, it's a fee, or it's an income that I earn, or XYZ fund family will pay me out of the annual expense that I've already mentioned to you earlier. It's not a commission. Now, legally, is it a commission? Yeah, legally fee-based is a commission. Everything's a commission, right? You bring business to the corporation pays you for it, and they're paying you a particular amount based upon how much you bring in. That's why the fee-based advisors are getting paid commissions just as well. It's not a flat fee. They get an income based upon how much money they're bringing in, right? $1 million pays more than 100,000, and 10 million pays even more. So that's called a commission. Okay, it's not a fee. So when you want to get legalese ways, they're all commissions or they're all fees, because it's the only fee is if you're an advisor that charges a flat fee to run a financial plan. You charge $1,000 to do a plan regardless whether they invest or not. That would be a fee. Anyway, you do want to stay away from the word commission. Now they're going to say it, or sometimes they say, how much do you get paid on this? You're not going to say, well, my commission is blah, blah, blah. What you would say is, the fee that I earn is built into the annual expense. Or however you do it, right? Even if you're fee-based, you say, yeah, the amount that I earn is built into the total cost that I can walk you through now. That's how I would say it if I was doing fee-based. right? And sometimes it even so how do you make money? Like more the mechanism. How do you make money? Sometimes they ask that. And that's where this one comes in. XYZ broker. I'm sorry, XYZ fund, whatever fund family. Let's say it's American funds. American funds will pay me based upon the total amount invested, and all that comes out of the annual expense. Obviously, if it's A share, then you have an upfront sales charge. You guys get all that. The point is, you don't want to say commission. Okay. Objection question. I actually mentioned that one earlier. They have an objection. Sometimes they even, every once in a while, a person will use the word have an objection, but usually they say I have a question, and that's what you want to do. That's a great question you have. That's an interesting question. Well, that's a little bit. I don't get that question too much. When you're saying it or referring to it, it's always a question, right? It's not even a concern. It's not an objection. They may use that word, you don't. It's a question. Also, this is one of the other ones, along with problem and challenge, that it's helpful for you psychologically in your mind to think of it as a question, not an objection. Even though in all the sales training, including our sales training, we call it, handling objections, because that's just what it's always called. But in your mind, it's always a question. Now, some questions are asked very nicely out of genuine curiosity and desire for knowledge, and some questions are almost like objections to stump you, and you can usually tell by the tone of voice. But you treat it like it's a question. Appointment visit, not a big one. A lot of these are not that big of a deal, but collectively it makes a difference. This one kind of is also a little bit in the pitch and sale kind of vibe. It's, you have an appointment almost never is good. It's a doctor's appointment. It's a lawyer's appointment. It's my tax person's appointment. Maybe it's a hair appointment, but, so you do a visit. Everything's a visit. It's all this casualness, Another one that's not on here is kind of the expression pop by. This is, if you're doing house calls, so to speak. Hey, Mr. Johnson, I'd love to just maybe pop by for a quick visit next Tuesday, if that's possible. I got a couple more things I'd like to show you. See, I'm popping by for a visit. I'm not going to set an appointment. You're popping by. You're having a visit. You're having a phone visit. And maybe what we can do is just kind of visit together via webinar around next Wednesday. Or just do a webinar. But appointment, not a big deal, but I always called it a visit, right? So especially after the first visit, if your sales process is similar to this, first visit, you're meeting them, they meet you, you're getting a chance to meet each other, you find out what their situation is, you kind of give an example of kind of work that you do, what you're all about, how the process works, etc. The ideal situation, they like what they hear, they're willing to have you run a proposal for them, right? So a proposal again. And now, one of the things I always taught my salespeople is if you got that far, where you're able to collect the data and get an agreement to run a proposal. If you're that far, then what you need to do, as much as possible, is set the next visit at the end of this visit you're on now. So if it's Tuesday right now, and you're basically wrapping up, you're done, you want to now schedule the next visit, not the appointment. Now, you may be back in your office, you're talking to your manager, talking to your husband, talking to your wife. You might call, hey, it's great because the Johnsons got me a second appointment. Of course, you can use these words, but when you're with them, you got to have your professional salesperson's hat on. You call it a visit. I'd like to do, Mr. Johnson, it's going to take me a few days to get this thing and do it right. So, but what I'd like to do to make it easier for me, if that's fine with you, is schedule the next visit where I will then more in detail show you the proposal. See, so again, I'm using proposal, right? I'm using visit. I'm also gentle. My tone is soft. And then your idea is obviously you schedule that. So there's a little free bonus tip is always try to schedule the second visit at the end of the first visit, not let me go run the proposal, take a look at it, then I'll call you and then schedule the appointment. No, don't do that. Try to do it there. All right. Here's the last one. And this one actually is a little different, somewhat different, only because it's not really a word. It's more just an expression or a phrase. And it is also very specific to A-share mutual funds, though obviously, this training is applicable to all kinds of situations. But in this case, you have, the upfront sales charge of an A-share is always the biggest issue. It's negligible from a financial standpoint, but it doesn't look like that to the client, right? So it's the upfront sales charge. Now, they don't call it that. They don't even know what it's called, but you've got to obviously explain to them what it is, because you're getting them involved. If you're getting them involved in, see, again, it's getting them. I'm so used to that. Like, I never say I'm selling them on an A-share mutual fund. I literally didn't do that on purpose. It just comes out from habit. I'm getting them involved in an A-share mutual fund. Then what I'd explain is, hey, the A-share mutual fund has, two different areas where the kind of fees, if you will, right? And the first, or two expenses. The first one is a one-time fee. I might even say it's technically called an upfront sales charge. And then I'll probably never say that phrase again. Okay? I mean, I do have to explain it to them. I'll say it's a one-time fee, and then you have very, very, very low annual expense, or maybe in this case, I mean the same cost, low cost forever. And then you go through and explain it and show them how it works, and depending upon how much. But the A-share concept is a one-time fee and then low cost for as long as you own it. I just wanted to add that one in there kind of as a freebie. Okay, and there's probably tons more, but you want to think about is what words tend to, in your opinion, tend to be maybe somewhat negatory. And one of the other things, I mentioned that little game that I used to play, or that we used to play sitting around the office with the words, or we'd have a whole list. And the list was actually a lot longer because we're marketing different products, life insurance, term life insurance. And so we had a lot of, and other products as well. So we had a much longer list of pro words and bad words. But the other thing that's more fun, the way to do, is when you're out and about, or even especially watching a movie and there's persuasion happening, maybe it's an actual salesperson in that scene, is pick up on things. What words, I mean, there's a lot of things you can pick up on, but in context of today's training is what particular words might have a little bit of a negative connotation. Maybe even these words we mentioned today, you're going to go through that list a little bit and then see if you can pick up on it. So almost by watching someone else, you can see how they use it and how maybe it makes you feel and how they could have said it in a nicer way. Okay. And that is, I'll kind of close with this lesson. That is what I think we've all heard a million times. It's not what you say, but how you say it. Obviously, of course, it matters what you say. You can't just say gibberish. But when it says how you say it, when I first heard that expression, I thought it simply meant the tone of voice, the character, right? The personality of the way I say it, which tremendously, in fact, that may even mostly what that means, actually. But it for sure isn't the only thing that's meant by how you say it. It actually literally means the actual words that you use. You're still saying the same thing. You're not changing what you're saying. You're using different words. And then, of course, you're going to say it in a very good personality. So that was it. Nasty words versus go-ahead words.